But I want to sort of start by offering place and placemaking as sort of a lens to connect the dots and bring us all together in different ways, and talk about how we're working to sort of parallel, I think, with conscious cities and need to connect these worlds to create a global network of learning, of bringing people from different sectors, different contexts together onto this effort. And I want to also challenge and sort of come at the sort of science data-driven approach from another angle. I want to talk about how, in a way, a focus on place and placemaking can ramp people on to feeling comfortable about a more scientific approach and create conscious cities or human-centered cities as an outcome, not necessarily as an input first. So how do we allow this to be a conversation that not just people in this room could have, but we can get this to be something that's accessible to many? So, thank you, perfect. So we're seeing people come to the cause of place and placemaking from many different sectors, many different causes and movements. And now whether that's at a block scale at the front of your building or your school, or citywide or globally, we often find people come to these issues from, they may be passionate about sustainability or resilience. They may be passionate about arts and culture or equity or food and public markets. And we're seeing how when we ask people together to build their shared environment, their shared value in their public realm, and then connect on how they're benefiting from it and how they can further contribute to that they can create more systemic change and broader collaboration. That we can break down the silos, as we've talked about, but also go deeper. Because right now, my fear is by simply being more conscious in our development, from within any discipline, we can also be perpetuating the systems that we have. By simply being more sensitive to the context, to the solutions, to equity, to health, to climate, we may not be going deep enough. And we may not be going deep enough to draw on the creativity and skills of each of these disciplines. It's not that the research, the skills aren't important, it's that we need more of them, but we need different systems, we need different ways of framing these conversations to bring people into it. And we have a crisis right now, because our imagination of the future of cities is not about place. It's about people taking value from place. It's about sort of a monoculture of ideas, a sort of static world where, frankly, the winners take all, and this is late stage innovation. But if you Google the future of cities, this image or images like it come up first. And it's been sort of seared into the back of our imaginations that the future city is technologically driven, is maybe some people's near idea of science, of data driven. It may actually be, the smart city is sold by technology companies. Again, we need a lot of their technologies, we need a smarter city, but leading with these technologies may be limiting the vision of it and preventing a more inclusive, creative potential for that. So right now we're still in a paradigm of planning within each of our disciplines, each of our departments or sectors. And we think if you plan, so for example, if you plan for design development, you get design development. This is Jakarta, where I was not too long ago. It looks a lot like these images, what American architects are building in China and the wealthiest parts of Latin America and in Brazil and elsewhere. It looks not that different from this. So we get what we plan for. And if we simply plan for more sensitive places or better design, that's not enough. This is the Guggenheim Bilbao, beautiful piece of art. I went here on my honeymoon. These two men mugged a tourist couple right in front of this space. It was actually the least safe I've ever felt. This space is designed perfectly for that pattern of activity. But it could have been the most friendly place in the city and by simply looking at and challenging buildings like this to also create places, not being against this type of architecture, but for places. So Jane Jacobs said that to approach the city as if it were an architectural problem is to make the mistake of substituting art for life. So again, it's not just about designing better. We need to lead with life, design from life, and you'll draw more creativity from design and from a whole range of disciplines that's needed to shape our public realm and our built environment. So similarly, traffic engineers have done perhaps the most damage, but we've also found that they're the ones that can most easily be flipped. When they've been challenged from just moving traffic, they've been solving the wrong problem. If we ask them to create places, build communities, create equitable, safe environments, it's a much more interesting challenge to them. They're great problem solvers. There's less of ego and artistry involved in that particular discipline. So we've actually had success with that. But it's certainly a major crisis. It's the limiting factor for most public spaces, for us feeling safe, comfortable, connected, and limiting social resilience, certainly in our environment, is the amount of time we're spending in our cars, the damage that they're doing to our streets, the way they really put fear in our veins wherever we go in our cities. So we see there's an evolution of development from what we call sort of project-driven, which is just efficiently building the infrastructure, discipline-led, let's get better experts in to build better solutions, better policies, better projects. Place-sensitive is let's engage the community, let's work across disciplines, let's be sensitive to culture, context, equity, community. But we think the goal, at least, has to be to move towards place-led, where we're collectively trying to create places of shared purpose and meaning, shared value, and most importantly, we're actually trying to build the capacity of communities to build that value. We're not just experts serving them. We're experts building their capacity to do this themselves, and actually to be better clients and partners in driving demand for this broader work. But in a way, this is about building the consciousness of communities, the shared responsibility of communities, the possibility for them to design more conscious cities as well with us, with others. And it's building their social resilience, building their capacity that is effectively, that needs to be the focus. And a lot of resilience, as we understand, the conversation has been more on, again, the solutions, the design, the policies, the technology, not on the aspects that I think actually that makes New York really stronger than most other cities, is the more informal placemaking, the more informal co-creation of neighborhoods, of space, that's more cultural, that's often more social, that often informs and feeds the built environment as well. So we need to turn the conversation upside down. If we lead with people and places, we start to get people in places, we start to get loved people in places. We want to focus the conversation not just on livability, which can be construed as a sort of a consumptive experience of the built environment that correlates with high cost of living. Investments in just livability, I think, do often correlate with negative gentrification. But lovability, let's invest in places that people love, that feel connected to. Loved places are places people stay in after a disaster, after other types of challenges. They reconnect in. That place attachment is increasingly needs to be a focus of research. There is a lot more research happening on that, but it's a softer side of science that actually there's people are researching how comfortable people feel, the level of stimulation people feel in the built environments, the connection. But it's these loved places that ultimately are the places that are going to win most in the future. It's people can go where they like more in the future, invest where they like, travel. Autonomous vehicles are going to allow us to commute from 9 hours away. For better or worse, it's the places that are most loved that will win. The places where people are most contributing to give love to those places, to co-create those spaces, to make them unique and special to their culture, identity, ecology, that are going to thrive. And so we need to get on that now to make sure, especially the most threatened communities, the communities that do potentially face risks, whether climate or other, can take on these challenges. This is a street we've been involved in Nairobi that did a lot of temporary changes, but it's more leading with informality. If it led first with streetscape, which they actually eventually did, we helped get the public plaza programs happening here, usually through short-term, low-cost improvements, but a lot of them are actually sometimes going too far. I just was in the meatpacking district, and it's too much towards aesthetics, which correlates too much with the high-end development, the chains, the more exclusionary cultural feel of these spaces. The city we've worked the most in project for public spaces has been Detroit, and there's major issues with gentrification here, but I also think there's sort of a buzz where everyone feels like when they've lived here for a long time or moving there, everyone's competing to contribute to shared value, to a shared story. And those are the cities that I think are going to lead most of the future. Not the ones that provide the most livable environment to consume or be part of, but the ones that allow people to shape them. Especially allow younger people or disadvantaged people to feel like they're co-creating that space. Whether that's informally, there's a space we worked on in Mexico City, or not. But we ran a series of conferences with UN Habitat called The Future of Places to try to make place and public spaces a global cause, included in the New Urban Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. And one of the key ideas that came out of the conference was that cities are not built forms, they are social forms. We must design from social life, not just for it. There's a lot to unpack there. And William White, who is the mentor of my father, Fred Kent, and Project for Public Spaces, he said it's hard to create a space that will not attract people. What is remarkable is how often this has been accomplished. So we've, a lot of the spaces that are still winning awards are exclusionary or unfriendly, at least to people. Yet it's often these more informal spaces. If you go to Piazza del Campo and Siena, it's the increasing informality as you come to the center, the increasing connection that people feel to each other, the increasing likelihood that strangers make eye contact, smile at each other, people that know each other well, that they connect, that they relax, that they lie down and have informed memories. So in a way, we think cities need to be centered around and invented around the most informal spaces, the most public spaces. Can't read how many more? 2 minutes, thank you. Perfect, thank you. Place attachment, I'll skip over this, but there's a study at the Knight Foundation that found that what leads people to be most attached to a community are the qualities of a good place. And that when people are more attached, it actually leads to higher economic development, higher entrepreneurship levels. People are more likely to invest in the long term if they love a place, if they want to stay there. But it's not so much the livability qualities, again, it's the opportunities for social engagement, cultural openness, and aesthetics. Those had to be a combination of those that would lead people to be attached to a place. Aesthetics alone, though, would never lead to attachment. You don't just fall in love with a place or a person just because of beauty. You also fall in love with it because you like to engage, you feel welcome, and you like to engage with them socially. So we shape our public spaces thereafter. They shape us. We don't realize the extent to which we're shaped by them, and to the extent we shape them. We need to see that reflexive pattern more, and we need to accelerate it. We need to be more proactive in the shaping of it. We need to lead with, the centers of our communities in Auckland. These are some friends that connected in the center of Auckland. This is this downtown Sydney, where I'm going here next week and for a placemaking week. But this still is like this in many parts of downtowns across the world. The fear that you have going there. So Jane Jacobs talked a lot about resilience and these ideas. She said, dull, inert cities, it is true, do contain the seeds of their own destruction and little else. Lively, diverse, intense cities contain the seeds of their own regeneration, with energy enough to carry over for problems and needs outside themselves. So we're in a dominant paradigm of development where people are competing to take value from place, to degrade shared value, and that's what we're seeing throughout. Yet the way to counter that isn't to just be a little less bad, but to lead with these patterns of governance, of financing, of development where people compete to contribute to shared value. And that's when it goes viral. If people see this wins, we show private sector developers that leading with shared value, with informality, with places that are welcoming to all, that's what drives the market, drives success, and get that to go viral. We think that's what's happened in New York, and the stories of this are going around the world. We've gotten to work on a lot of these key public spaces over the last 43 years. And one of our first projects was Bryant Park. The cities fail and succeed at the human scale, and it's the scale of human interaction, of social resilience, that connections are made, that cities fail and succeed. But no one really plans for that scale. We need to make our blocks, every scale, work at that scale. If we're not connecting people, slowing people down, making people smile and connect with each other, it's not going to work. But we have to learn more from the process and the management and governance and financing projects. We can't, unfortunately, many cities around the world are copying the design of these spaces, not the informal and formal governance and processes that have shaped these spaces. They're not focusing on the place level or the human scale and the scale of purpose and meaning in these spaces, the place experience, not just the design experience. So placemaking is a collaborative process by which we can shape our public realm in order to maximize shared value. An MIT study found that its biggest benefit is actually building the social capital, building the connections between people, building the social resilience. But again, through the process. So even if you know the outcome, even if your data tells you this is what the space should look like, the process of placemaking, if people coming to that conclusion themselves, yields the biggest outcomes, especially for social resilience. So with PPS, our focus always is to work on places. We've gotten to work all over the world on a lot of key projects, from Harvard to Perth, where I'm going in a few weeks. But it's also always making sure we're building a movement locally around that space, building a network, building social resilience, building capacity around that city, and also making sure we're not just perpetuating existing systems, existing patterns of the way things are done, but creating systemic change and pulling together these many different causes and movements. So with that, we're starting a new organization called Placemaking X, which is focused on networking the people doing this around the world. So I hope to include many of you. My father sort of started the placemaking movement about 20 years ago, saying everyone has the right to live in a great place. More importantly, everyone has the right to contribute to making the place where they already live great. And we've since had conferences all over the world, with many more coming up even this year. They're convening the placemaking leaders. We had one launching the placemaking network with UN Habitat in China last December. Saskia Sassen, I'm going to have to skip over this, but this idea that public cities need formality, shared value, flexibility, but again, it's the people without power that can shape cities when they're incomplete, when they're seen as delivered incomplete. So with Brookings, last quick point, we led an initiative on placemaking and innovation, basically connecting place shaping and economy shaping over the last few years. And we realized we were very disconnected from economy shaping. We were sort of ignorant to some of that. But they realized the limiting factor for good economy shaping, for innovation, was bump rates, was essentially social resilience and informal relationships. And they talk about social density as the new paradigm. Leading with social density is a new paradigm for city building and economy shaping. A vibrant public realm acts like density, concentrating the social interactions that drive innovation. And social density can happen in low-density environments. It can happen in rural communities even. So there's this nexus of democratizing innovation, allowing everyone to feel part of the economy shaping through placemaking, through these innovation hubs. So Placemaking X is a network to accelerate placemaking for global impact, placemakingx.org. And one of our board members at PPS that helped launch this movement, saying that we're creating a global movement to shape spaces into places, really to give purpose and meaning to space, but really maybe to give, to build the consciousness of community of people in places, of consciousness, to build their consciousness beyond their private realm, to have shared responsibility for each other, to ramp them onto larger global challenges and global crises. It may be one of the most fundamental roles of our purpose in this existence is basically connecting, is living through place and connecting to each other through our shared experiences in places. So how we make those richer, how we create sort of positive feedback loops so we're all contributing to place everywhere we go, is really what builds our global consciousness. And building our global consciousness, from local to global consciousness, is how we build our capacity to thrive, to take on bigger challenges, and to be resilient. So really look forward to being part of the conversation with you all today. Thanks so much for having me.